For 19 years, they were the heartbeat of Hollywood. Two souls who turned love into legend. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban weren't just a couple. They were living proof that fame could coexist with faith, that devotion could survive applause. On red carpets, they moved like poetry, her hand resting lightly on his arm, his gaze anchored to her as if she were his only horizon. To millions, they were perfection. To each other, they were home. But every fairy tale has a shadow. Behind the bright flash of cameras, something fragile had begun to crack. Every photograph hid a silence. Every award night carried an invisible distance. The world saw the beauty, but only they felt the fracture. When the news broke that they were ending their 19-year marriage, it was as if the curtain had fallen on the last pure love story in Hollywood. Fans wept. Journalists scrambled for answers, yet none of them knew that the truth was far more human than scandal. It was heartbreak, wrapped in grace. At 57, Keith Urban finally spoke. His words were not a confession, but a reflection. Quiet, steady, stripped of glamour. He said that love, no matter how deep, can lose its rhythm when life plays too loudly. That even devotion can turn to distance if not tended like a fragile flame. He did not blame her, nor himself. He spoke like a man who had lived enough to understand that sometimes the greatest tragedy in love isn't betrayal, it's time. The slow kind that erodes closeness, not with storms, but with silence. And so the golden couple faded, not in anger, but in acceptance. Their ending wasn't the explosion of stars, it was the dimming of light that once held the world's gaze. Because even the brightest constellations must one day burn out, leaving behind not darkness, but memory. Long before their names were carved into the silver air of Hollywood, before the glitter and the applause, there were two lonely children under the same vast southern sky. Different cities, different childhoods, yet the same yearning to be seen, to be loved, to belong. Keith Lionel Urban was born in Whangarei, New Zealand, and raised in Caboolture, a small working-class town in Queensland, Australia. His father sold convenience goods and played country records on the weekends. His mother, a woman of quiet resolve, tried to hold the family together between long silences and longer debts. Keith was the younger son, soft-spoken, sensitive, and endlessly drawn to the sound of strings. At night, when his parents argued behind the paper-thin walls, he would press his ear to his guitar and play until the noise disappeared. The music saved me because it gave me something I could control. He grew up barefoot, his fingers bleeding from steel strings, his dreams stretching far beyond the fields of Caboolture. Nicole Mary Kidman's world looked different on the outside, yet underneath it held its own storms. She was born in Honolulu while her Australian parents were studying abroad. Her father, Anthony, was a psychologist. Janelle was a nurse and activist. The Kidman home was filled with books and ideals. But Nicole's world was inward, a place of imagination and daydreams. She was tall, pale, shy, always feeling too much. Other children teased her for her height and porcelain skin. She retreated into plays, into the safety of characters who could say things she never dared. Acting wasn't vanity, it was survival. Each role gave her a voice, each stage a brief escape from the ache of being misunderstood. Both grew up chasing something they couldn't name. For Keith, it was freedom through music.
For Nicole, truth through emotion. And though they didn't know it, the same sky, that endless blue over the Pacific, watched over them both. Two souls destined to collide decades later, when the timing and the wounds were right.
By the early 2000s, Nicole had already been through the furnace of fame. Her marriage to Tom Cruise had ended in heartbreak and public scrutiny. She once said, "I was broken. I didn't know how to be alone." Hollywood adored her, but the world she lived in felt cold, hollow. She wanted something pure again, something real. Keith was walking his own tightrope. After years of grinding through the country music circuit, he was finally making a name in Nashville. But success had come with its own shadow, a battle with alcohol and cocaine that blurred the line between triumph and self-destruction. He was adored on stage and hollow off it, the applause unable to quiet the ache of his own demons. And then came the night that changed everything. January 15th, 2005, the G-Day Australia Gala in Los Angeles, a celebration of Australian talent abroad. She was there as the nation's cinematic queen, he as its musical son. Under the golden lights of the ballroom they met. Their first conversation was brief, almost hesitant, but the air around them seemed to still. Nicole would later say, "I felt it instantly, something familiar, something safe." But Keith, shy and cautious, didn't act. Months passed. She told friends, half laughing, "I guess he's not interested." Then came her 38th birthday. It was early morning in New York. The city was still asleep when the doorbell rang. Nicole opened the door to find Keith standing there, holding a small bouquet of white gardenias, her favorite flower. His voice was soft. "Happy birthday." No fanfare, no grand gesture, just sincerity. That was all it took. Right then, she said later, I knew I was gone. From that moment, the rhythm of their lives began to align. Their conversations were long, intimate, full of laughter and confessions. She told him she had stopped believing in forever. He told her he was still trying to believe in himself. They spoke not as stars, but as survivors. When he kissed her for the first time, it was quiet. Not a movie moment, but something gentler, trembling with truth. They didn't fall in love fast. They grew into it, like two trees intertwining after years of standing alone. By the end of that year, the press had caught on. They tried to keep the romance private, but love that genuine can't stay hidden long. In his concerts, his voice softened when he sang of a heart worth fighting for. Nicole, in interviews, began smiling again, the kind of smile that looked unpracticed, almost surprised. For two people who had spent their lives performing, it was the first time they felt real. Their love story wasn't written in diamonds or fame. It was written in mornings like that one in New York, in small acts of devotion, in the miracle of two people who had known pain, choosing to try again. And somewhere over that same southern sky that once watched two lonely children, the stars must have smiled, for destiny had finally kept its promise. Their wedding was not a spectacle of fame, but a whisper of faith. On the evening of June 25, 2006, inside the soft-lit St. Patrick's Estate Church in Sydney, candles flickered like 1,000 heartbeats. The air was heavy with jasmine. Violins trembled in the rafters, and every vow felt like a prayer. Nicole, radiant in lace and grace, walked toward Keith, who stood trembling, not from nerves, but from gratitude. After decades of searching, he had finally found a place where his soul could rest. They didn't promise perfection, they promised presence. When he slipped the ring on her finger, he whispered something only she could hear. "I'll never let the silence win again." And she smiled because she understood what he meant.
Both of them had lived through silences that could devour a person whole. Their wedding was brief, almost modest, but filled with laughter. They disappeared from Hollywood's noise and reappeared in the quiet rhythms of daily life. Nicole at last found comfort in being ordinary, barefoot in the kitchen, holding his guitar as he played love songs he hadn't yet written down. Keith, newly sober, saw in her not the global star, but the woman who listened to him breathe when words failed. But only a few months after the vows, darkness came knocking again. Keith's old demons, alcohol, cocaine, self-doubt, returned like ghosts that never fully die. He checked himself into rehab in October 2006, just 4 months after their wedding. The headlines erupted. Nicole Kidman's new husband in rehab. Paparazzi crowded the gates. Whispers spread that the fairy tale had ended before it began.
But Nicole didn't flinch. She didn't flee. She stood by him, quietly, fiercely. She told the press nothing, told her friends even less. But behind closed doors, she called him every day, sent letters that began with "Remember who you are." He read them in the sterile stillness of recovery rooms, his hands trembling, tears soaking the paper. Later he would say, "She saved my life." When Keith emerged from treatment, thin but clear-eyed, Nicole was waiting at the airport. There were no cameras, no grand gestures. She simply took his hand and said, "Let's go home." That was the moment he began to believe that redemption wasn't just a word, it was a person. They rebuilt slowly. He began writing again, songs full of gratitude, melody stitched with vulnerability. She found courage in smaller films, choosing roles that explored pain and resilience instead of perfection. Rabbit Hole, Australia, 9. Each project seemed to echo her personal rebirth. In 2008, their first daughter, Sunday Rose, was born. Nicole was 41, radiant, trembling with the awe of late motherhood. She told a reporter, "I feel like I've been given a second childhood. Through her eyes, I see innocence again." Keith wrote Sweet Thing around the same time, a celebration of joy after darkness. Every chord, every lyric carried traces of her laughter and the tiny heartbeat of their newborn. 2 years later, in 2010, their second daughter, Faith Margaret, arrived via surrogate, a child Nicole called the greatest gift of trust. The name was symbolic, Faith for belief, and Margaret for her grandmother, who once told her that love's truest test was endurance. For a while, they lived in a rhythm that felt unshakable. Mornings began with sunlight spilling through their Nashville home. Keith would strum a guitar while their daughters danced in pajamas. Evenings ended with quiet, her script scattered on the couch, his unfinished lyrics by the lamp. They had made it through addiction, distance, and scrutiny. Love, it seemed, had triumphed. Nicole once said in an interview, "I married a man who doesn't run from storms. He faces them." Keith, for his part, told a concert crowd, "She's the reason I'm alive and sober. Every song I play is a thank you." And yet, in that triumph lay a quiet warning. Because when two souls rise together from the ashes, they sometimes forget the fire is still burning beneath.
For most of the world, the next decade looked like a dream that refused to end. On red carpets, they glided side by side, two halves of a myth that had somehow become real. Reporters called them the Southern Royals of Hollywood.
Magazines printed their photos like paintings, her hand resting gently on his chest, his arm curved protectively around her. The world saw devotion, glamour, and grace. But beneath the flashbulbs, they were learning that light can blind as easily as it can illuminate. Nicole's star burned brighter than ever. After Rabbit Hole came Stoker, Lion, Big Little Lies, and Being the Ricardos. With each role, she peeled back another layer of herself, exposing pain, resilience, and womanhood in its rawest form. Critics called her fearless, but that fearlessness came at a cost. Every film took her away to London, Morocco, Los Angeles. Each character demanded pieces of her heart, leaving less of it at home. Keith, meanwhile, reigned over his own kingdom. His songs climbed the charts, his guitar solos lit up stadiums from Nashville to New York to Melbourne. When he stepped onto a stage, the crowd roared, thousands of voices singing his words back to him. But for all the volume, the sound couldn't fill the growing quiet that waited when he stepped off stage. He poured himself into the music because he didn't know how to say what he felt. And in her silence, Nicole learned to bury her loneliness behind elegance. They lived like travelers passing each other between flights, reunions filled with kisses and promises, partings marked with unspoken worry. They had become experts in temporary joy. Their daughters, Sunday and Faith, grew up among airports and hotel rooms, their childhoods measured in boarding passes and bedtime FaceTimes. Still, they tried. They carved out sanctuaries of normalcy. Christmases in Sydney, summers on their farm in Tennessee, birthdays with handmade cakes and out-of-tune guitars. For a time, those small rituals felt like anchors, keeping them steady amid the whirlwind of fame. When they appeared together at award shows, the audience leaned in. She would whisper something, and he would laugh, his head tilting toward her like a sunflower toward light. The camera always caught it, that effortless tenderness. But tenderness can be rehearsed, and smiles can be learned. Behind the applause, cracks deepened. Keith began sleeping on tour buses more often than in their shared bed. Nicole spent nights alone on distant film sets, staring out hotel windows at city lights that seemed to mock the glittering promise of the life she once imagined. In interviews, she called him my deep, deep love. He called her my compass. But love stretched across continents began to thin like a string pulled too tight. There were small betrayals, not of bodies, but of time. Missed anniversaries, forgotten calls, messages answered with hours of delay. One evening, during a rare weekend together, she asked gently, "When was the last time we had dinner without an audience?" He smiled, but couldn't answer. Fame was supposed to be their reward, the crown for all they overcame. Instead, it became a third presence in their marriage, a glittering ghost that demanded constant attention. Nicole often said she could play any emotion on screen except contentment. Happiness is too still, she joked, but privately she wondered if she had forgotten what it truly felt like. Keith tried to express his devotion the only way he knew, through music. Songs like The Fighter and Parallel Line carried coded messages, apologies, gratitude, love letters disguised as melodies. Audiences sang along, unaware that they were witnessing a man begging the universe for another chance to keep what mattered most. But the distance persisted. The world that had once called them a miracle couple began to whisper, "Are they drifting apart?" Neither of them answered. They posed for photos, smiled for cameras, and went home to separate flights, separate beds, separate dreams. And yet, even as they unraveled, there was a strange beauty in their endurance. They weren't enemies. They were echoes, two souls bound by history, still reaching for each other through the noise. Their kingdom of lights still shone, but behind it, the shadows had grown longer. The world saw the glow. Only they felt the burn. It didn't collapse all at once. Love rarely does. It frays, it bends, it forgets its rhythm long before the final note fades. For Keith and Nicole, the unraveling began quietly, almost tenderly. There were no slammed doors, no harsh words, just absences, the kind that linger longer than presence.
At first, they called it Time Apart. She was in London filming Practical Magic 2. He was in Europe with his High and Alive world tour. They told friends that distance made the heart grow fonder. But distance also has a way of teaching hearts how to live without each other. Weeks turned to months. He wrote her letters that sat unopened in dressing rooms. She left him voicemails he never heard because the phone was drowned out by stadium roars. When they finally saw each other, their conversations were polite, safe, the kind you have with someone you love but can no longer reach. The girls noticed first. Sunday stopped asking when Daddy would be home. Faith started sleeping beside Nicole, afraid of the silence in the hall. The laughter that had once filled their house now echoed faintly, like an old recording played too many times. Keith began drinking again, not recklessly, but quietly. A glass of wine after shows, whiskey before sleep. He told himself he had control, that he deserved it after years of sobriety. But addiction doesn't knock before entering. It slips in through the smallest cracks of loneliness. Nicole found out through someone on his tour. Her heart didn't break with anger. It broke with exhaustion. "I can't save him twice," she whispered to a friend. Still, she tried. She flew to Nashville unannounced. The reunion was soft at first. A long hug, tears, a promise to start over. For a brief moment, it felt possible. They sat on the back porch, guitars and scripts beside them, watching the Tennessee dusk fade into indigo. He played a new melody, one that trembled between apology and hope. She listened, smiling sadly. But as the night deepened, their silence grew heavier than the song. It was the silence of two people who had run out of words. The following months brought more distance. Public appearances became rare. When they did appear together, their smiles felt choreographed, flawless, professional, hollow. The media called it strain under busy schedules. Their friends called it denial. Then one morning, Nicole woke up to find Keith gone. His note was brief. "I need time to breathe." No promise of return, no signature, just absence. By summer 2025, whispers became truth. Keith had moved into his own Nashville apartment. The family home, once alive with music, now stood still. Nicole, still wearing her wedding band, tried to protect her daughters from the headlines. She told them, "Your father loves you very much." She didn't add, "He just doesn't know how to stay." On September 30th, 2025, Nicole Kidman filed for divorce after 19 years of marriage. The words irreconcilable differences appeared on paper, sterile and weightless, but beneath them lived every tear, every late-night argument, every lonely hotel room that had carried the ghost of what once was. For the public, it was a shock. For them, it was a mercy. Keith didn't contest the filing. The arrangement was civil. Nicole retained custody of their daughters, Sunday, now 17, and Faith, 14. Keith would have visitation rights during breaks in his touring schedule. No alimony, no public dispute, just quiet division. Two lives split down the middle, both still bleeding. Their lawyers exchanged documents. Their daughters exchanged glances they didn't understand. That night, Nicole sat on the porch alone. The air smelled of rain. She thought about the church in Sydney where it all began. The candles, the music, the trembling promise. She wondered if love ever truly dies, or if it simply changes shape, becoming something the world can no longer recognize.
Across the ocean, Keith stood on stage, finishing the last song of his set. The crowd cheered, thousands of voices chanting his name. But when the lights dimmed and the applause faded, he whispered into the darkness, "I'm sorry." No one heard him. The tragedy of their story was not that they stopped loving each other. It was that they kept loving each other, just in different directions. And so the fairy tale that once inspired millions ended not with scandal, but with silence. Not with betrayal, but with the quiet truth that love, even when real, is not always enough to survive the noise of the world. The last candle of their Sydney wedding, that soft, flickering symbol of forever, had finally gone out. And yet, even as the flame died, its warmth lingered in memory. After the papers were signed and the cameras turned away, the real story began, the one no one could photograph. The story of what love leaves behind when it can no longer hold itself together. For months, Nicole Kidman disappeared from public life. She stayed in their Nashville home with the girls, refusing interviews, declining red carpets. The actress who had built her life on being seen finally allowed herself to be invisible. Friends said she spent long evenings on the porch reading old letters, sometimes just sitting in silence. One of them described it simply: she wasn't mourning the end of love, she was mourning the silence that killed it. Those closest to her knew she had been blindsided, not by the divorce itself, but by how quickly it came. Keith's decision to leave had been quiet, methodical, almost kind, and that made it hurt even more. There was no explosion, no betrayal to hate him for, just a slow withdrawal, like the tide retreating from shore, leaving her standing barefoot on wet sand, unsure when the waves would return. She told a confidant, it wasn't about him falling out of love, it was about him falling out of reach. Keith's truth was different, but no less painful. He had spent his entire life trying to outrun his own shadows, addiction, pressure, fear of failure. When he finally had everything, he realized he didn't know how to stand still. Music was his anchor, but also his escape. He didn't mean to leave, he just didn't know how to stay. He wrote songs that year that never made it to any album. Songs about silence, distance, and the ache of watching something perfect unravel. One chorus went, "You were the calm I couldn't keep, the quiet I drowned to feel complete." He didn't name her. He didn't need to. Everyone knew. For Nicole, the healing was slower, quieter. She never blamed him publicly. In her rare interviews, she chose honesty over bitterness. Sometimes she said softly, "Love doesn't end because it's broken. It ends because it's finished its work. It teaches you something, and then it lets you go." What she learned was this: love cannot survive on devotion alone. It needs communication, respect, safety, the things that fame steals quietly while pretending to give everything. She admitted that she had spent too many years protecting an image, the perfect wife, the perfect family, when what she needed most was truth. She explained once, "The betrayal wasn't a person. It was the moment I realized how much I had silenced myself to keep peace." At 58, she began choosing peace that didn't require self-erasure.
She returned to acting not as escape, but as expression. Her performances grew deeper, stripped of pretense, almost spiritual. Every character carried shades of her own journey: grief, endurance, rebirth.